Yo, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is your boy Zeddy here, and I am back at it again to drop part 2 for the amazing series of What If Deku Was Spider-Man. Now, this series went on a little bit of a tiny hiatus just due to the fact that I had other videos that I had to drop in front of it, but now it is in full effect, as well as with What If Deku Was Red Hood. So in case you guys like Spider-Man, I have zero doubts you guys are going to love What If Deku Was a Red Hood. So in case you're watching this series and you're on part 2 and you haven't seen Red Hood, I would recommend going over there to watch it. That being said, however, that's pretty much all I have to say for this. We're going to get into a mini recap just due to the fact that the series has been gone for like 2 or 3 days, and then we're just going to go ahead and start off the video. So for the recap, basically what ended up happening on the last part was that Deku started off as a nerd. He started off as a nerdy kid just like in the original. He ends up gaining his powers similar to the movies, kind of, I guess you could say, and Bakugo in this version of events isn't really that relevant to the story just due to the fact that he's kind of weak in terms of all the other characters that are going to be, you know, just brought up in this version. MJ is in the story and she has a shape-shifting quirk, and well, Deku is just OP. What can I say? Deku and MJ are dating and they end up taking the exams, and that's pretty much it for pretty much the recap. So with that being said, I don't want to waste your guys' time too much, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so we start off our story right where we had left off. On the last part, I left off with the notion of Deku and MJ finishing off the entrance exams and going off to do their very own thing. During these couple of days that they had to kind of take a rest and kind of just chill, you know, just have their own little things going on, they ended up, of course, getting their entrance acceptance letters. And this is when I said entrance acceptance. No, it's not that, but their UA acceptance letters. Now, this is when Deku would, of course, be home when he would get a text from MJ saying that she just got her letter. Did he get his? It's at this point that Deku would read that and be like, oh, I gotta go check. As he would, of course, go over to his mailbox and check. He'd send her a text back saying, yeah, I did. Want to open them together? As he and MJ would end up meeting each other at Deku's house, she would pull up about 10 minutes later, and Deku, Inko, and MJ would all open their letters together in a table. As this is when they would both be told that they, of course, got in, and Inko would immediately start celebrating, hugging the both of them, saying that she loves them both, and she would then kiss Deku and MJ on the foreheads, as she would say, all right, now where do you guys want to go out to eat? My treat. As Deku would look at his mom and say, Mom, you don't have to do this. As MJ would say, I kind of don't mind getting some food. Deku would start laughing, and this is when they would all basically end up going to Olive Garden. I mean, I like that place. They'd end up going to Olive Garden, and, you know, Deku ends up getting the chicken Alfredo just because, bro, if you get anything other than the chicken Alfredo, what are you doing, bro? Like seriously, the chicken Alfredo is life. But yeah, Deku ends up getting that. MJ ends up getting same thing, and Inko ends up getting some weird adult thing that, you know, a lot of adults get weird things. They always try something new. I don't know what's up with that, but you know, she ends up getting something new, and she ends up hating it just because, you know, why would you get something new if you already know what you like? But yeah, that aside, this is when Deku and, you know, everybody else would basically just end up that little night, and they would end up having the very next day to get ready for school. That same night, Deku would, of course, start ironing his clothes and just doing the things that most of us always do when it's time to go to our first day of school, right? Deku at this point would basically just start, you know, getting all ready, and this is when Deku would get his clothes, you know, iron all that stuff. He'd have some breakfast, and this is when Deku would meet MJ at her door about 30 minutes before class starts. Deku would ask her if she wants to go swinging to school, and she would say, of course she does, to which Deku would say, perfect, hold on. She would say, wait, I did my hair, as Deku would grab her and they would start swinging through the air at max speeds over to UA, as this is when she would land and Deku would as well. With them both having their hair a little frizzy, Deku would basically fix his back up into place, and he would hand MJ a brush, to which she would say, thank you, and they'd basically walk inside as Deku starts laughing uncontrollably. This is when they would walk inside, and they would then see the huge door of UA. They would look at that and immediately just be like, yeah, this is a pretty big door. Deku would say, I wonder if it's heavy, as he would grab it and it would feel like a feather. Deku would open the door, and immediately they would be greeted to a blue-haired boy and a blondie just kind of sitting there arguing. This, of course, being Katsuki and Ida, who are both kind of yelling at each other due to, you know, Bakugo being a little bit of a prick, and Ida just being a teacher's pet. This is when Deku and MJ would walk in, and they just be like, yeah, we're not sitting anywhere near that area. As Deku would say, how about we go sit towards the back? I mean, it's the best area. As MJ would be like, sure. As they would both go back there, this is when they would both have a pretty normal encounter up until a brown-haired girl would come in, or a brunette, I guess you could say. Or Raka, of course. She would walk inside and be like, hey, it's you two. I knew you guys were going to get into the school. She'd then be like, I honestly didn't know if I was going to be in the same class as you guys. As she'd start rambling, Deku would be like, yo, chill. And MJ would be like, yeah, I mean, we're just like you. She would then sit down right next to them, and this is when Deku would say, so, what's your quirk? And she would say, oh, my quirk is, but right as she's about to finish that sentence, Aizawa would then say, listen up, my name is Shota Aizawa. I am your first grade teacher. Throw these on and meet me outside. Deku would look towards Aizawa as he would say, so we're just not going to go to orientation? And he would say, there's no time for that stuff. If you really want to just get told about how great you are, I mean, you might as well go to class 1B, where all the rejects are at. As this one, Deku would say, wow, it's harsh. And Aizawa would then say, no, but seriously, throw these on and meet me outside. And this is when everybody would throw on the gym outfits, go to the locker rooms and get changed. Mineta would definitely try to look through that hole, but the second that Deku sees that, he would shoot a spider web straight at Mineta's eyes, and he would not be able to take them off for the life of him. Until Deku just starts laughing at him and says that that's what you get for trying to peep in on my girl. Mineta would say, I didn't know that with your girl, Deku. As Deku would just say, why are you calling me that? He would say, that's not your name? I heard Katsuki Bakugo calling you that. As Deku would immediately look towards Mineta, he would say, yeah, that's just a little nickname that he gave me. Kind of as something to be rude, I guess you could say. Mineta would look at Deku as he would say, oh, and he would apologize. He'd say, come on, just take it off of me. Deku would say, fine, as he would rip off the web from his face. They would then all meet outside with Aizawa, and this is when Aizawa would throw the ball at Deku's direction. Deku would catch it and palm it as he would say, what's with this? As Aizawa would tell Deku to throw it as far as he physically can. Deku would then look towards the sky and he'd say, so I can throw this as hard as I can? And Aizawa would say, yeah. Don't hurt yourself too bad. Deku would then smile, reel his arm back, and throw that straight into Hosu City. That thing would have gone far, like really far. Deku would have thrown it very, very, far, and he would have ended up throwing it all the way over to Hosu City. This is when everybody would be shocked, and they'd be like, this kid is so strong. As Aizawa would get that little smirk that he would have gotten from Deku and Canon, he would then end up thinking that this kid is incredible. As this is when everybody else would go up, and as soon as Bakugo sees that, he'd get angry, as he would say that he's gonna blow him out of proportion. He would then say that it's time to really show people what he's made of. As he would get into a little bit of a baseball stance, he would then say, all right, I'm gonna throw this explosion in there and it should go far. He would reel his arm back and he would only end up getting about 700 to 800 meters. I'm saying this due to the fact that Bakugo is a little stronger in this version just because of that rival boost. That being said, though, this is when everybody else would go on to take their little exam stuffs, and they would all basically take on their quirk assessments. Deku and MJ would actually end up getting the two top best scores, and they would have definitely ended up getting a lot of improvements to their quirks, the way that they use them, just everything overall. Those 10 months were definitely useful. And yeah, they end up doing incredibly well in this version of events. MJ, of course, is not in the original version, but I added her to the story just due to the fact that I wasn't about to ship him with anybody if I could just add MJ to the story, right? Now, this is when they would both basically just get told by everybody that they did great, as everybody would start to say, so who got the worst? As Aizawa would then say, these are what you guys ended up scoring. He would then look towards Mineta as he would say, you are going to be expelled from UA. As Mineta would say, what? No, there's no way. You can't. As Aizawa would say, I'm kidding. That was just a normal ruse to see who was going to be expelled and to get you guys to try your best. As Momo would say that, yeah, guys, you guys didn't know. Like Momo sounded so dumb when she said that, honestly, because Aizawa really could have expelled them all. Like, I don't know. That part where Momo says that kind of makes me angry at her, but whatever. Momo's a little teacher's pet when you really think about it. Some of you guys are probably in the comments typing up angry stuff like, how dare you say that about my queen, my empress? No. To all of you simps out there, I like Momo too, just not that much. I can definitely see the flaws in her character. Anyways, that being said, this is when they would both basically just look at each other, smile, and give each other a little, you feel me? As they would both basically end up just kind of finishing up with all this stuff. And this is when the little quirk exam day would basically end. It's at this point where they would both end up just going off home, and they would end up going to MJ's house, which they would have some dope dinner. And at this time, we are going to be switching our perspectives to Osborne. It's at this current moment that Osborn would be walking inside of his lab, the lab with a spider, and this is when he would have ended up basically just saying, I can't replicate it. I can't replicate the research. He would bang his hand on the desk as he would say that that spider was everything. It was the finished copy, the product, but he just can't seem to replicate it. At this point, he would have ended up trying to create 1,000 spiders to try to create the same effect, but none of them would have worked. Their bodies were simply not strong enough to handle the toxin which the spider was injected with, and Osborn would just be freaking out, as it's at this current moment that Osborn would be in the room with the military officer just kind of walking in there with him. He would begin to say that he only has until tomorrow to find a project which will be well worth them purchasing, and Osborn at this point would freak out. Something very similar to the events of the original Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire would basically happen. I almost said Tommy, that's weird, but Tobey Maguire would basically happen, and Osborn would honestly have no choice. He needs to create something which can rival that, and up to this current moment, he hasn't exactly created a spider which can give those same results. The spider was a safer route. It would just modify your DNA code, but the toxin hasn't been tested. Its side effects are still not calculated. They're still not sure of everything. This is when Osborn would decide that, if he doesn't do this now, he'll lose all of his assets. So he has only one choice: to inject himself with the gas. Or no, not inject, but to inhale the gas in the gas chamber. He would end up going inside, and the doctor who was right next to him, who was actually going to help him with the operation, would say that it's not safe. They should just wait, that, losing all of his assets is not worth maybe dying in this experiment. Osborn would grab him by the shirt as he would say that there's no time. They don't have any more time. He needs to do this now, or his company, everything that he's ever worked for, will fall under. As he would say, do you understand what that means to me? The doctor would then look at him and say, I don't. As this is when, basically the Green Goblin would look at him, or Osborn would say that, fine, I'll do it myself. As he would push him out of the way, he would then smash on the button as he would then walk into the gas chamber, and he would immediately start the transformation of the Green Goblin. This would be a scene very reminiscent to that of the original Spider-Man movie with the Green Goblin being created. And after everything ended up happening, he would get buffed up. He would feel younger, stronger, faster, and even smarter. That toxin made him incredibly powerful. And if you guys thought that Deku's spider was OP, this toxin was as well. It's not like he was just going to make it like the original one. Original Green Goblin would be nothing but a joke in the My Hero verse. So yeah, this version of the Green Goblin was definitely buffed as well. So he ends up gaining abilities that actually do match Deku's spider abilities. He gains a healing factor which puts Deku's to shame. Strength far greater than Deku's. Enhanced stats, even beyond that of the spider, and his ability to analyze anybody's weak points. So he can immediately look at someone and analyze their weaknesses and weak spots. This toxin, the gas, the Green Goblin, was something that would put the spider to shame. It was far more powerful, however, it did come with its downsides. He would lose his sanity. His sanity would go down after every single time that he uses it, and this is the worst case scenario for it. This is when everything would basically start playing out kind of similar to how it did in the movies. Osborn would start to freak out and lose his sense of self, and at this point he would end up destroying the scientists who helped him create the Green Goblin toxin, being even more powerful than the original. His costume, you guys may be wondering, what's his costume going to be like? It's definitely going to be very similar to that of the one from the movie. However, it is going to be futuristic just due to the fact that these events happen way later than the version that happened in the Green Goblin. Their tech is far greater than anything that, the Spider-Man verse has in the movies. So yeah, everything is going very, very great. Now, at this point, even though Deku is kind of just relaxing with MJ at home, his greatest rival, the Goblin, is born. Deku and MJ would basically at this point end up having a relatively normal couple of days. The next 3 days of school would be very normal, and no really noteworthy events would honestly be going down at this point. This is when they would both just kind of be going to classes and kind of just having dates here and there, with everything kind of playing out as you would expect like normal teen relationship to happen, as well as UA days. Everything would be kind of boring. However, this is when everything would change, when at the last day of the third day, All Might would bust in through the door saying, "I am here!" As Deku and everybody else would be in shock. They'd say, "All Might!" And Deku, even though he's still a fanboy of All Might, our boy Deku, even though, he saw him earlier, so he's not that freaked out about it. He's like, "All Might, you're teaching at UA?" All Might would say, "Yes, young man." As he would then say, "What is your name?" Deku would say, "Izuku Parker." And All Might would then say, "All right, young Parker, well, we have a lot to do today, so all of you guys need to go put these suits on because the clothes make the pros." As all of them would basically get suited up, and we would then have a very dope scene with Deku walking out with his costume. This is where you guys are going to get the first look at what Deku's costume is. When Deku walks into the changing room, he doesn't exactly take out a costume. Deku's costume has always been with him. Deku would immediately use the genetics of the symbiote, and from his skin alone, a weird black substance would begin to cover his body. As this is when Deku would have a costume on him, and this would be the one that you guys will be seeing up on screen at this current moment. The color would be black, red, and white. It is actually made by Blue Keith himself. He was the one who ended up creating the costume for this version of Deku. And if I have to say so personally, I honestly think that this costume design is honestly awesome. Like the color scheme, the white, the black, the red, the lines, it all looks dope to me. And he of course has the hoodie. So this is basically what Deku's costume is going to look like. A little bit similar to Miles Morales, if I do say so myself, but it is dope in and of itself. That being said, Deku would walk outside with this costume, and immediately people would look at him and be like, "Whoa." Kaminari would walk up to Deku and be like, "Dude, this costume is awesome. How did you get it? I didn't even see you change." Deku would say, "Oh." As the mask would disappear from his face, he would say, "Kind of made it myself." As Kaminari would be like, "Dude, that is awesome." He would fist bump Deku, and everybody would end up going outside. To which MJ would see Deku's costume again for the millionth time, and she'd say, "That old thing again. Couldn't you have changed the costume?" Deku would say, "Come on, I like it." And she would say, "Yeah, I liked it too about the first 100 times, but now it kind of feels like it's getting old." Deku would say, "All right, let me change a couple things." And he would add a couple new things to the costume. And yeah, the man would be looking drippy. Drip is an understatement, honestly. He would be looking very, very fire. It's at this point that Deku would, of course, I said at this point way too many times, but Deku would at this point essentially just kind of go over to All Might, to which All Might would basically look at all the students and tell them all that they are now going to start picking out lots for who they are going to be teamed up against. They are going to be having an event called the Heroes versus Villains. He would begin to explain everything, and this is when it would all be decided. The teams will be as follows: Deku and MJ. You guys knew that was coming. Don't act like you didn't. Versus Bakugo and Ida. As soon as this was announced, Deku's eyes would widen, and Bakugo would look at Deku with a sort of confused look on his face. He would think that it's about time he finally gets this rematch. And not only will he finally defeat Deku, but I'll do it in front of all these people. Deku's been training for this moment. Or no, Bakugo, not Deku, but Bakugo's been training for this moment. And he's finally going to put this training to use. Deku would look towards Bakugo and give him a little bit of a smile, as he would give him some thumbs up and tell him to try his best. Bakugo would scoff at this notion and tell Four Eyes to come on, let's go. As Ida would walk over with Bakugo and say, "Hey, you need to show some more respect to your fellow classmates." Bakugo would say, "Whatever, nerd," and they would then end up going away. It's at this point where they would decide to basically end up going up to the top, and Ida and Bakugo would have similar encounter to what they did in the original, except this time Bakugo would tell him to guard the bomb instead of just to stay here, to stay out of his way. He would then tell Ida that he's going to be handling Spider Boy, and you can handle the shapeshifter if you can. As Bakugo would start laughing, and he would then walk away. This is when Deku and MJ would both just look at each other as they would say, "So what's the plan?" at the same time. As they would both smile and chuckle, they would then say, "Who are we kidding? We know exactly what the plan is." Deku would smile, and they would both kind of telepathically know what's going on. Not exactly telepath, but they both kind of know what they're thinking. They both have a sort of sync nature. They're both so similar that they just know what they're going to be doing. It's at this point that Deku and MJ would look towards each other and they would then start walking inside. Is they're really having nothing to think about. This is when Deku would see that things are getting a little boring, honestly, and MJ would say that she can definitely agree with that. Deku would then say that, she should go off to find the bomb room and he'll just stay behind and handle Bakugo, seeing as he knows that that's coming. MJ would say, yeah, I know it's coming. You sure you don't want me to put him in his place? As Deku would say that, nah, it won't be necessary. MJ would say, alright, and she'd say, well, see you on the flip side, as she would, basically continue walking. This is when we would then hear, Deku, coming from far away from the tunnels, as he would say, you're dead, as this is when he would come in with an explosion, blasting away at Deku. But immediately as he does, Deku would spin out of the direction. He would then know that Bakugo's about to do something that he would have never expected. Bakugo would spin midair and start turning into a little bit of a tornado, as he would say, fire a spiral cannon, as he would immediately basically start shooting explosions in every direction. Deku would immediately fall under Bakugo and he would hold his hands over his face as the impact would cover him just barely. This is when Bakugo would land on top of the roof. He would then blast himself over to Deku. Deku would jump away doing a backflip as he would then say too slow. This is when we would then have Bakugo saying ugh, and he would then rush at Deku as he would say AP shot. He would then shoot a bunch of those at Deku as Deku would start dodging and going over each and every single one of the shots. Deku would then say that he has something very similar to that as he would shoot acid shots at both of Bakugo's gauntlets, which would render them useless. And this is when Deku would, shoot a web at Bakugo's arms. He would close them together, tie him up, shoot a web at his mouth, eyes, and ears, and he would just say, alright, I captured Bakugo. As he would tell MJ that, she would say, yeah, tell me why you took a little longer than I thought you would. Deku would say that he was just giving Bakugo some hope. As Bakugo at this point would just be like, brr, brr, just caught up in everything. This one everybody would say, dude, that kid is awesome. His powers and quirk is amazing. This is when everybody would begin to discuss how awesome his powers are. And this is when Deku would then proceed to basically climb up. As he would then open a window and he would start using his spider crawling ability to go up all the way to where MJ's at. She would say that she's at the door and Deku would say that that's perfect. Bust in and I'll bust in through the window while he's not looking. Ida would then hear a knock at the door as she'd say, pizza delivery. Ida would say, that's weird, I didn't order any, as immediately she would bust through the door and the door would go over to hit Ida. As Ida would get knocked over, this is when Deku in that split moment would turn invisible, open the window as he would crawl into the room, go over to the bomb and touch it, getting them both to be the winner. As at that moment, Ida had barely been waking up from the impact and they would have ended up winning that entire battle. This is when they would both be like, oh, that was perfect. As MJ would run over to Deku. Deku would catch her by the waist and he would then say, so I think that definitely deserves a little bit of a celebratory date. She would say, where are you going to take me? As Deku would say, I was talking about for me. And she would say, yeah, no, you owe me one. As Deku would just say, fine. He'd say, how about we go to our favorite coffee shop? As MJ would say, I'm down. And this is when they would both end up leaving UA. A couple of hours later, they'd basically end up leaving. And this is when they would both end up going over to their houses to get ready. MJ would be telling Deku to meet him there at 5. And Deku would, of course, been getting drippy at this moment. Deku looks exactly like what he does in the thumbnail. And Deku would end up throwing on a little hoodie, some pants, and some shoes. Just casual outfit, right? MJ would have done as well, and Deku would then just swing over to her house as he would end up picking up a box of chocolate and flowers. He would have ended up just throwing the money to the people, and he would have used his webs to shoot him over to himself. As he would end up swinging over to MJ's house, he would immediately go in through the window and ask her if she's ready, as he would see her, and he doesn't see a scene that's very PG-13. Deku would say, oh, as MJ would say, not now, as Deku would say, fine, and he would then go outside as he would wait for her, and he'd say, well, after this day, I better get something, and she would say, you sure will, but you gotta wait for it, as Deku would say, perfect. As it's at this point that they would both end up basically going to the coffee shop, and they would end up having an honestly amazing date. They'd have a pretty good time just talking with each other, and they'd both just be reminiscing on their first time that they ever came here when Deku was a little shyer, and he ended up asking MJ on a date. She would say that it was so cute how shy he was and how he basically didn't know what to say. He seemed to have zero confidence. Deku would say, stop making fun of him, and MJ would start laughing. It's at this moment that Deku would do that as well, but out of the corner of his eyes, he would see a sort of weird orb coming at their direction. This is when Deku would say, get down, as immediately he would move at top speeds, as he would grab MJ and cover her, as immediately he would suit up. and his suit would cover the explosion as Deku would ask her if she's okay. This is when the Green Goblin would be up in disguise as he's throwing bombs at every direction, just trying to get the attention of the military councilman, as at this current moment they're actually having a little bit of a festival, just like in Spider-Man 1. I know a lot of you guys are like, dude, this is not even MHA. You might as well just be ripping off the story. But I mean, come on now, bro. Like, this is just fire. Like, I want to do this, so this is what I'm gonna do. Anyways, this is when Deku would basically look over to that direction of the Green Goblin, and he would immediately shoot a web at the propulsor, the jet thing that he has. As he would swing over there, as he would then throw a punch at the Goblin, he would then hurt his hand as he would say, what? He would have thrown a full power one at that, and the Goblin would just literally tank that thing. The armor would have absorbed most of the hit, and this is when the Goblin would literally punch Deku straight in the gut, sending him crashing into a building. He would have smashed all the way through it, and Deku would then get up as he would say, I'm gonna be feeling that one for the next week. The Goblin would then go over to Deku and throw a bunch of explosions at him, as Deku would then use his metal webbings to create a shield in front of himself. He would then use that as he would grab the piece of webbing that he created and fling it at the Goblin. The Goblin would literally be going right at it as he would jump off of the jet, and he would then land on top of the metal pieces. He would run over it and get back on his, equipment. This is when he would shoot a bunch of little bat things, the ones that Harry used in Spider-Man 3, as Deku would immediately get cut by a couple of those. This is when Deku would then decide that it's time to stop playing. Black webbing would then come in out of nowhere, and it would start overtaking the suit, as Deku would shoot a giant amount of webs at the Goblin. The webs would then light on fire, as he would have actually ended up catching him, but the fire would do absolutely nothing, as it's at this point that Deku would end up frying the entire suit by shoving 1,000,000 volts straight into it. As the Goblin would then be, short-circuited for a while, it would restart itself and it would rip off the web before Deku could even increase the lightning on it. As it's at this point that the Goblin would end up blitzing over towards Deku using his speed, as he would have ended up jumping off of the jet propulsor. He would end up basically landing in front of Deku, as he would grab him by the throat, slam him into a building. He would then say, listen kid, how about you stay out of what doesn't concern you? As Deku would then say, no, get away from here, MJ. As MJ would have actually been coming in right behind him. She would have barely ended up getting up to the building, and she would then, basically she would turn her hand into a scythe and cut one of the Goblin's legs off, as immediately the leg would regenerate, but the armor wouldn't. As he would then turn towards her direction, Deku would then say, no, run. As it's at this point that the Goblin would smile inside of the suit, Osborn would, and he would then throw a bomb straight at her, as Deku would say, no. The bomb would go off and she would be thrown off of the building, as she would be in critical condition. Deku would think that she died, and it's at this moment that Deku would tears would just start overrunning himself, and he would grab the Goblin's hand as he would say, get away from her, as he would rip his hand off. He would then punch the Goblin as hard as he physically could, straight through 3 buildings, as he would then shoot spiderwebs straight at him, as he would run into him and he would hit him, as he would have the Goblin's head spin, cracking itself, as the Goblin would then drop onto the ground, and Deku would think that he finally did the job. It's at this moment that he would have realized what he had just done, and he would then fall to his knees, as in that split second the Goblin would regenerate and he would rise back, as he would then step on Deku's skull. He would then start repeatedly smashing into it, as Deku would start crying out for help. This is when a bunch of pro heroes would arrive on the scene, and this is when Osborn would finally snap back into reality. He would have realized what he was doing, and Deku's mask would have been ripped to shreds at this point. The piece of the costume that was on it, he would see that he was killing a kid, and it's at this moment that he would say, what was I doing? He would then realize everything that just happened, and it's at this moment that the Goblin would look around, as he would see Endeavor, All Might around him, and he would then say, I did this. As he would then look towards both of his hands, he would realize what just happened in this situation. As he would jump away using his jet to get the hell out of that situation, he would then immediately run off, as Deku and MJ would immediately get rushed over to the hospital. And this is where we're going to be ending the part for What If Deku Was Spider-Man. I may or may not be ending off MJ in this part, so you guys are definitely going to have to stay tuned for the next part to find out what happens. Does Osborn stay evil? Does he come back into the light? What ends up happening on the next part? Does Deku recover? What happens to his ego after this? These questions will all be answered in the next part of What If Deku Was Spider-Man. So if you guys are excited for that part, definitely make sure you guys smash that like button, seeing as your boy is going to need about 500 likes to continue part 3. That being said though guys, it has been your boy Zether and I am out. Peace.